Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Ksenia. I'm an artist, book lover, and gardener. Here you see some phlox blooming behind me. Today I will be doing a book review of The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. She was one of the women on the women's prize list in the UK. She was on the shortlist, and I thought I would start with her because I came across some TEDx talks with her and some other talks she gave, and I thought that she was such a wise woman, and I wanted to see what her latest book is like. This book is written on a very complex subject, the division of the island of Cyprus between the Greeks and the Turkish. It covers so many different issues and the conflict there, and so much we don't know about what happened there and the level of violence that escalated, and the people who were there who were so torn between first seeing their neighbors as just neighbors and being friendly and kind, and then having all these lines drawn up and the military be there and all these conflicts. And she handled it, I think, very well. It was a bit violent at times, so it was a little bit hard to read for me personally, but I I would give this book like maybe 4 stars. So first I will list the things that I really liked about it. Starting from the beginning, like, I really like that it's clear that she is a very curious person who's exploring a lot of things. Each of her books seems very, very different. Even though I haven't read the others, she seems like a person who really uses a book, and this is what she said in one of her TEDx talks, to explore a theme that she wants to understand, to develop her empathy for a certain group of people or a certain profession or a certain circumstance. And she's very curious. And very early on in the book, I really loved this quote. So many times in the past, she had suspected that she carried within a sadness that was not quite her own. In a science class, they had learned that everyone inherited one chromosome from their mother and one from their father, long threads of DNA with thousands of genes that build billions of neurons and trillions of connections between them. All that genetic information passed from parents to offspring. Survival, growth, reproduction, and the color of your hair, the shape of your nose, whether you had freckles or sneezed in sunlight. Everything was in there. But none of that answered the one question burning in her mind. Was it possible to inherit something as intangible and immeasurable as sorrow? It really reminded me of a nonfiction book I read recently called It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin, and it explored exactly this topic. And it was a science book with a lot of, research done behind it that proved that yes, you can inherit emotional patterns from your parents. You can inherit their sorrow. And the fact that she noticed this, observed this, and wanted to explore it further in this book, I thought was very original, to me personally at least. But she also knows a lot about trees, about the ecosystem, all these very fun to me, especially as a gardener, facts about trees, how they communicate, how they hold each other up, all the different ways we are connected to the trees. There's a speaking tree in one of the characters is a fig tree. And I know some people didn't really like that. And I understand how it might have come off a little bit heavy-handed and at times even preachy. Like, we all know we should care about the environment, we shouldn't cut down trees, and we should be aware that destroying the planet would also destroy us, and we don't need to be told that again. But I think that she was very moderate in the preachiness, and it didn't bother me as much as I think it did other people, because there's a lot of beautiful information, and overall there's just so much empathy for the characters, for this daughter who now lives in England and who suffers from, feeling like she's cut off from her ancestors. This other quote. I'll share 3 quotes in total. I thought that was just like a normal, average amount of time to share what I love about this book. So the second quote is from when she goes and visits an exorcist because her aunt insists on it. She's very superstitious and stuff, so she's like, and she goes, and the guys, or the woman, whatever, I don't remember. It was like a month ago that I read this book. She is obviously a sham, like she's not a true helper of any kind, and she's just there for the profits. But she notices that the woman didn't seem to mind when she acted weird. And that's when it occurred to Ada that in the eyes of the stranger, she too was one of the mahun. And as such, she could say crazy things and do even crazier things and would still be forgiven. What latitude! Perhaps in a world bound with rules and regulations that made little sense, and you usually privileged a few over the many, madness was the only true freedom. And I think that given what I've, read in her or listened to in her talks, she kind of uses this as a universal metaphor. Like, given the way that the few rule the many and all the regulations that are placed in our world, that madness is the only kind of true freedom. Like, if you don't obey these regulations the way that the 1% says you should act, then you will be frowned upon. You will be counted as an outcast. But at the same time, there's freedom in that. So the last quote is when, you already know most of the backstory between her parents and how they were born on the different sides of the island, and how they met and everything, and how they got back together, and so that they had this daughter. And so her mother, the girl's mother, says, "It's late. Please don't patronize me." Her dark eyes were inscrutable. "I have thought about this for so long. I've seen how it works. I talk to people all the time. It doesn't go away, Costas. Once it's inside your head, whether it's your own memory or your parents or your grandparents, this fucking pain becomes part of your flesh. It stays with you and marks you permanently. It messes up your psychology and shapes how you think of yourself and others." Later it says, "Daphne sat on the sofa, her arms dangling by her side, a lifeless doll. Just promise me, that's all I ask. If we want our child to have a good future, we have to cut her off from our past." And I think this is one of the things that Elif actually disagrees with by bringing attention to this story. And in general, like in her work, she brings up a lot of unresolved cultural things. And I think she maybe even read the book I mentioned, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen, because he points out how it's important to address the trauma, remember the trauma, and in that remembrance there is healing. And I think she believes that too, that it's important to remember. In one of her videos, she talks about the difference between cultures and how some cultures are more bound to forget and not remember, and how that's harmful. This book was beautiful, I think. I understand why it was on the shortlist. I'm glad that I came across it, and I will be reading her more in the future, but I will probably reserve her books as not my lighter reads as I expected this to be, because I didn't read the blurb that much. So yeah, I will be reading the winner, the Ruth Ozeki, The Book of Form and Emptiness, sometime this year, and see if I like it better, or if maybe this book. So yeah, if you read this book, if you disagree with me, if you have any other parts that you really loved, or which book from the shortlist do you think should have won, please let me know in the comments. I always read them, and I look forward to connecting with you further, and I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, bye.